the impact of Biden's executive order on artificial intelligence. I'm joined today by Colin S. Levy. He is an attorney and legal technology expert. Hello, Colin.
Hi there. How are you?
Good, and thank you for being with me. What is Biden's executive order on so-called safe, secure, and trustworthy AI all about?
Yeah, so it's really kind of a pretty comprehensive, although not particularly specific, attempt to address, what kind of has long been, or at least seems like has long been the elephant in the room, which is the rise of artificial intelligence. And really it tries to do that by laying out a variety of different principles that are intended to sort of address various concerns that have been raised with respect to artificial intelligence, including bias, prejudice, safety, and oversight over its development. Because as we've seen, artificial intelligence is continuing to grow both in terms of power and influence. And I think the US, along with other jurisdictions, is really kind of wrestling with how to continue to support innovation and technological advancement, and at the same time address safety, which is obviously an important element of using these tools, which are powerful and capable of doing quite a lot, and their power continues to grow as technology continues to advance.
So, what does the executive order specifically propose to do? How would it bring into being these safeguards?
Sure. So one of the things that it is trying to do is requiring risk assessments before any AI system is deployed. It's not exactly clear exactly how these assessments would work or what the criteria would be, but it definitely points in the direction of there being oversight over these models and ensuring that they are assessed for various risks before they're allowed to be deployed, particularly in the context of national security and in the context of user safety. So that's one thing.
Mhm.
Another is that it intends to sort of allow for a so-called Bill of Rights to safeguard civil liberties with their use of AI tools. But again, the details of that Bill of Rights are a bit unclear. But at the very least, it looks like it's pointing in the direction of allowing for robust due process protections and allowing and or encouraging human review of algorithmic decisions, which I think is an important step in the right direction, because artificial intelligence is really a set of tools that are best used in conjunction with human judgment and knowledge, and not used solely by itself.
Mhm.
I also think that it's notable to see the emphasis within the executive order on the Department of Homeland Security and its role in sort of providing the teeth for this executive order and providing some of the criteria and guidelines around some of its various initiatives.
Well, there's that word teeth. What would the teeth be? How would it be enforced?
That's a really good question, and the executive order doesn't exactly go into much detail with respect to enforcement, but certainly I think enforcement could look like having to sort of go through some sort of authorization slash regulatory process to get, perhaps a permit for use of an AI system, for its risk to be assessed in the context of national security, which would be conducted by the Department of Homeland Security, and perhaps some, specific punishments with respect to violating a particular regulatory um, uh, rule or permit or what have you. But again, it's kind of a bit up in the air at this point. But I certainly think that, looking upon how government traditionally has enforced various rules upon the populace, certainly, some degree of permitting along with potential punishments seems to be the direction that these things would go in, particularly with respect to perhaps imposing financial and or usability penalties on some of these systems should they be in violation of whatever criteria are developed under the guise of this executive order.
Yeah, of course, it probably constitutes what might be considered the first volley in this effort. What has to happen now? We would be looking at multiple proposed rulemakings from various government agencies. Would there be congressional action required? I mean, for that matter, is the executive branch empowered to do this without Congress? I mean, what has to happen on all fronts in order for this to go forward?
Sure. Well, a lot has to happen to be completely blunt. And in terms of the agencies involved, executive orders are only capable of doing so much, and I would say that this executive order is doing as much as it can in terms of the executive branch and its power. So really, there's going to be a heavy reliance on legislative rulemaking and agency rulemaking, both of which will be, I think, challenging to do in a timely manner, and in all likelihood, not going to at all keep pace with their pace of technological advancement. The very least, I think what will happen is that there'll be some further discussions around rulemaking. Agencies, I think, at this point are probably best positioned to develop rules, given that they are, at least currently under law, have a little more leniency and a little more authority to promulgate rules without needing congressional approval. But at the same time, certainly the legislative branch is going to be required to wrestle with this issue and come up with rules to govern the use of AI. And in today's sort of uncertain and pretty unstable political environment, it's going to be a pretty steep hill to climb, I would say.
Yeah. Which agency might be expected to take the lead on this, or for that matter, might it require the formation of an entirely new agency? What do you think?
That is possible in terms of the creation of a new agency. At the very least, I certainly think the Department of Homeland Security seems to be one of the agencies involved. I think that the SEC and FTC also will likely be involved. Are probably the ones that come to mind most immediately. Beyond that, I'm not really sure. I mean, arguably all agencies would be involved, which may point in the direction of there needing to be some sort of AI agency tasked with governing AI. But again, the question of, who's on that agency, how is this power prescribed, who provides oversight over it, are all open questions that remain unanswered right now.
It feels like at least tangentially related to earlier efforts to curb or to ensure consumer data protection, which, as we know, is more advanced in Europe than it is here right now, but it's going forward and through in multiple countries. Might that serve as kind of a template for how we might go forward with AI regulation, or is this so unrelated to that or so unique in its own way that it wouldn't be a reference point?
So I do think it's a useful reference point because data is kind of the lifeblood of AI. Data is really how AI thrives and lives, so to speak. So I certainly think that the data privacy approach taken by Europe is likely going to be the same or similar approach that Europe will take towards AI. And I think we've seen elements of that with their AI bill. In terms of the US tends to take more of a laissez-faire approach to regulation and data privacy. So I think that we'll see perhaps elements of, GDPR and other laws that were passed in Europe with respect to AI. But again, I think it's going to be a bit of a more broader approach and less stringent than Europe will take. And that is, I think, due to not just political issues, but also due to cultural ones. And that culturally speaking, Europe has always taken a more stronger stance with respect to new things, whereas the US has taken a bit more of a experimental approach, if you will.
Now, we have seen leaders in the AI industry themselves express grave reservations about the direction that AI is going, including some of the ones who are actually developing AI. What has been the reaction of the AI industry to the executive order so far? And do you expect it to cooperate in the long run?
So I do think that AI developers will likely cooperate with the executive order right now, especially considering there's no real kind of consequence for being in violation of it. However, I certainly think that as regulations get promulgated and then start to get passed and potentially enforced, there'll be some pushback along the lines of, well, we need to be able to innovate, and this is impeding our ability to innovate. So I certainly think that's going to be a line of argument we're going to hear more and more with respect to sort of open AI and other developers of AI that have said, look, we should be regulated. I think it's a little bit self-serving at this point, considering they already have developed these things,
Yeah.
and we didn't hear much from them before the development of these
Mhm.
tools. But at the same time, I do think that there is some degree of at least tacit recognition that AI is its power is continuing to grow, and it will need to be in some ways prescribed, and the way that is going to happen remains to be seen.
But industry is hardly speaking with one voice. I mean, we have more aggressive so-called AI titans who are pushing back against any kind of curbs or restrictions on AI. And then we have others who are wringing their hands and saying this is the end of the world. So there's no one voice that we can rely on. So that might maybe hamper the ability of industry as one to cooperate, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've already seen a variety of different perspectives being put out there. Some who, to your point, have said, AI is going to be the end of us. Others who've said AI is going to be just the start of human advancement. We'll be somewhere in between. I don't think it's going to be the end of us, but I certainly think it's going to require a lot of adaptation and some, I think, uncomfortable um, moments, because we're going to have to get used to a world in which AI continues to play a more and more prominent and bigger role.
Colin, how do you imagine this executive order in the long run might impact your own world, that is, the world of legal technology and the legal sector?
Well, I think we've already seen artificial intelligence playing a bigger and bigger role in the development of technologies and solutions. And for me professionally as well as personally, I'm more than happy to delegate some of my day to day to artificial intelligence, because it's time consuming and repetitive work that is probably best done by an AI solution rather than done by me. So
Mhm.
I would much rather have my time freed up to spend it on more valuable things. That being said, I certainly think that, including myself and others, adaptation will be, I think, the theme of anyone in any industry as we see AI continuing to grow.
Mhm. Early days are not promising when AI creates pleadings and quotes cases that didn't exist. That's kind of a snag, is it not? I would think.
It's a snag, but it's also very much a function of the fact that some of these AI solutions are not versed and trained on legal data, so you can't expect them to come up with legal briefs. And also, quite frankly, the lawyers that were using these tools to draft briefs, not checking their work, I think were incompetent to not do so. And so I think it's more a story of legal/lawyer incompetence than it is of technology not doing its job. The technology did its job; it just didn't do it well. And I think that's really the story right now of artificial intelligence, is because we're in such early days, artificial intelligence really is kind of capable of producing, maybe first or second drafts of things, but not a final polished draft, certainly not that of a brief or some other legal document.
It is far from determine the ultimate impact of this executive order on AI, but Colin Levy, thank you so much for helping us to understand just how it's beginning and what might be the implications going forward. I do want to quickly mention your book, The Legal Tech Ecosystem, Innovation, Advancement, and the Future of Law Practice. We were talking about the legal sector, so there's a book that our viewers might be interested in checking out. And I hope we can speak again on this subject in the future. But in the meantime, thank you very much, Colin Levy, for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.